If you look historically, you can find lots of examples of states that just changed unexpectedly. Or they threatened to change and the parties reacted.
Another thing that people always talk about with elections is that now we're in a position where we know that certain states are basically always going to be blue. We're in one right now. States are pretty much close to always being red. You live in one in Texas, although that one's even getting a little iffy these days. But that now we're putting so much pressure on these few swing states. So Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, things like that. Do you see a risk in that? That then they do almost like an overcorrection where they pretty much ignore, like if a Democrat's like, well, I've got California in the bag, forget California, and then I'm going to spend all my time focusing on these three other states.
I'm not one who thinks that red states stay red and blue states stay blue. I think that there are periods of time where there is a stretch and that might happen, but if you look at California, as recently as 1988, you guys voted for George H.W. Bush. That wasn't that long ago, really. And you can look at if you look at the whole history of states voting, what you really see are states that, well, let me back up. I also don't buy the idea that only swing states matter. Safe states are important. Like you just said, no Democrat wants to go in the election without California in its back pocket. So what do they do to make California happy? It has to do with the governance. It has to do with the laws that are, California is happy and blue because it's happy with what Democrats have been doing in office for the 4 years that preceded the election. And when they start to become unhappy, they're going to let people know pretty quickly.
Right. I don't even know that they're happy in this state anymore. I think it's just like, oh, we're blue, we're blue. That just kind of how it is. And the Republicans here, who I've talked to, some of them are just so defeated. They're like, we're trying so hard. We're watching our state crumble and high taxes and more homeless people and more drugs on the streets and all this stuff. But they're just kind of throwing their hands up like, we've just lost so many times in a row now.
I always wonder what would happen if people just voted without regard to how they felt about it. For every state. Like, what if all the Democrats came out in Texas? It didn't assume that they were going to lose, that they just came out. What if all the Republicans came out in California? It didn't assume they were going to lose, just came out.
Just came out,
see what would happen. But also, if you look historically, you can find lots of examples of states that just changed unexpectedly. Or they threatened to change and the parties reacted. Utah in 2016 was threatening to vote third party. Okay, so they were just unhappy. They're ready. And Mike Pence was dispatched to the state to make things right because Republican Party did not want to lose its small, safe little red state of Utah. In 2000, West Virginia flipped. They flipped because they became really unhappy with the environmental policies of the Democratic Party. And they swung the election. We all focus on Florida, but without West Virginia, there was no way that George W. Bush was going to win that election. So a safe, small state flipped and changed everything. And you can look through history and you can see states changing their allegiance, back and forth over time. So I tend to say, look, the safe states matter. They made up their minds earlier in the process based upon the governance that came before. And swing states are just late to make up their minds. They're indecisive. But everybody's important. You can't get to 270 without some combination of safe and swing states. You simply can't get there. So you got to do something to get them on your side.
So is there anything you would do with the way the Electoral College is set up to tweak it, to tighten it or anything? Or do you feel it's basically as perfect a system as we can do in a country of 320 million some odd people?
I like it. When I first started this close to 20 years ago, there were small things I would change. I thought, well, maybe we could automate the elector, so there's no possibility of elector independence, or maybe we could change the contingent election process, where the president's elected by the House if nobody can get a majority. And I thought maybe we could tweak it. But the more I study it, the more I look, the more I think this is just a really delicate balance. And if you change one thing, you don't know what kind of domino effect that might have. And so I would just leave everything. I think and it may not be perfect, but it's the best we're going to do in an imperfect world. I steal something Winston Churchill said sometimes, and he said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have tried. So I say, the Electoral College is the worst possible form of presidential election, except for all the others that have been tried. It's the best we can do in an imperfect world, and it's got a lot of benefits.
So this is a slight deviation from Electoral College specifically, but what do you think of sort of the state of people believing that the system itself works, that the election process works and is untampered with and Russians and hacking and
the
all of
fraud.
these things, and right, just fraud in general. Because it seems to me that no matter what happens in the next election, half the country is going to claim that it was illegitimate, and we're seeing this even now. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, now that Hillary's sort of reappearing, you know, she's basically calling Trump an illegitimate president because she did win the popular vote, as we talked about.
Right.
So it's like, it seems to me that that again comes to the optics part of it, where it's like we're setting up something where half the country, no matter what, every 4 years, is going to think that something illegal or immoral or awful has happened.
Well, this is what I would observe. There's no such thing as perfection. There will always be people that want to cheat. There will always be people that will look for a way to steal an election if they can. I can't fix that. Nobody can fix that. The Electoral College can't fix that. But what we can do is we can make it as hard as possible. We can throw up as many hurdles as we possibly can. And if you have a national popular vote system, then what you have is one centralized national database that, or just voting system tabulation, whatever. You just have to hack one thing. Okay, you have to, and that means, by the way, also that you have to be on defense in every single precinct of the country. So you can be in the bluest blue California precinct, and if votes are stolen there, you affect everybody. Or the reddest red Texas precinct, that vote affects everybody. Right now we have a situation where you don't have to be on defense absolutely everywhere. You just have to be on defense in a few danger spots, which means you can focus all of your resources there, and that's better. Also, by the way, if you're talking about hacking, it's not just hacking one national tally. You have to actually hack multiple tallies around the country, because there are 51 different election systems, 50 plus DC election systems. So you'd have to identify which one would be, the most relevant, which state's going to be close, which state could swing this, can I hack it? And you have to be able to have all of these things working for you before you can actually steal an election. Is it impossible? Probably not. I'm not going to claim that. But you can make it as hard as possible and make it so that they have to get through as many hoops as possible before they can influence you.
Right. So okay. So as somebody that obviously you like states' rights, and you're trying to set up a system the way it was originally set to be, which is that you're trying not to give too much power to the federal government. Would you leave the voting mechanisms to the states, or should we have a federally mandated system of voting? Because right now it's like we got hanging chads in one state, and we got electronic voting in another state. Some states have receipts after the electronic voting, some states don't, and a zillion other punch cards and a gajillion different things, which that in and of itself seems really messy.
I think one of the most important things that people don't appreciate or know about the Electoral College is how important it is to protect its state's prerogative just to choose to run its own election, choose its own electors, and to be in charge of itself. And maybe the best way to demonstrate that is to show what would happen on the opposite side. If we did have one national tally, well, what that means is a national election code, a national bureaucracy, a new presidential appointee to run this whole thing that you've put in place. And so now you've got potentially an incumbent president in charge of his own election because he's in charge of the federal machinery that will make it happen. But how it is now, every state makes its own decisions. Some states will make better decisions than others. It's like the laboratories of democracy kind of idea. They'll see what works, what doesn't work, they'll change. But everybody will be in charge of themselves, and that by itself is a protection. If
we want to isolate one clip, and next time somebody says to me, Dave, why do you think the Electoral College is good? Can you give me like the sort of bumper sticker video that we can use to just push out to people in a couple minutes, like the cleanest, clearest reasoning for the Electoral College?
I just always say it makes presidential candidates reach out to a wide variety of voters. Given how big and diverse our country is, it's important. The founders thought that 13 states was too large and too diverse to have anything else. Well, we're so much bigger right now. And so people say it's outdated, and I say the opposite. It's more important now. How can we expect such a diverse country to govern itself if we don't have? This is the only person expected to represent all of us. The only one. There are senators that represent states, or congressmen that represent districts. Everybody else represents a smaller subset of people. The president must elect the most liberal person, or represent the most liberal people in California and the most conservative people in, Mississippi or something. So it's just, you got to have a special system in place for that to make him or her take into consideration as many people as possible.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.